Chapter 87, Past, Present, and Future, 3. Swoosh. Extending his hand forward and swiping right, the scene before me changed once again. This time, instead of a classroom, it was right outside Ren's house. Standing outside of Ren's house, Ren and Matthew stood before each other. Compared to before, Matthew's demeanor was completely different. If before he was gloomy and lonely, he now looked like an outstanding and refined young man. His very presence screamed elegance. His warm eyes and voice would instantly cause everyone who met him to have a good impression of him. A stark contrast to before. Smiling, Matthew took out 2 transparent potions from his pocket and showed them to Ren. "Hey, Ren, my dad was extremely happy with my results recently and he gave me 2 advanced potions." "What? How did you even get a hold of such expensive potions?" Opening his eyes wide, Ren couldn't help but look at the 2 potions with a hint of envy. It had to be noted that a single advanced potion could go for tens of millions of U. That's how expensive they were. Moreover, compared to intermediate ones, they were much more efficient. No wonder Ren was surprised. Scratching the back of his head and chuckling, Matthew said, "Well, I really did please my father this time. After he gave them to me, he said that it was a good investment into my future. Damn, I'm getting jealous here. I haven't even tried an intermediate potion, let alone an advanced 1-inch. Nodding his head multiple times, extending his hands, Matthew put both potions in Ren's hand. "Yup, I know, that's why I'm giving them to you, more precisely give them to your parents." Stupefied, Ren's hands shook as he held onto those potions. With his eyes wide open, Ren's voice couldn't help but tremble. What are you doing?" "I'm giving them to you." Dude, do you know how expensive these things are?" "What about you?" Seeing Ren's state, Matthew couldn't help but laugh out loud. "No worries. I already had one. It's the least I can do to repay your parents for having taken care of me over the years. If I had to be honest, they're like my second parents." Crack. Bullshit. Turning my head, I saw Ren beside me clenching his fist hard as his hands cracked. His face became incomparably dark as he stared at Matthew with pure hatred. Biting his lips, he coldly spat. "If you truly cared about them like they were your second parents, you wouldn't have, damn it." Confused, I wanted to ask what he meant by that, but I decided to just watch the scene before me unfold. I was bound to find the answer sooner or later. Staring at the 2 potions in his hands, Ren hesitated before looking back at Matthew and once again asking in a trembling voice, Are you sure?"
"Yeah."
"Just take it." Staring at Matthew, and noticing his earnest expression, Ren shook his head and sighed. "All right, if you're so adamant about me taking them, refusing you will just be rude on my end." "You've made the right choice. Thank your parents when you give them the potions. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be the man I am today." Shaking his head, Ren smiled. "Sure, I will." Waving his hand, with a big smile on his face, Matthew turned around and left the compound. As Matthew turned around, the smile on his face slowly faded. "I'm sorry, best friend." Swoosh. Without looking at me, swiping right, once again, the scenery around me changed. Glancing at Ren who was beside me, though he returned to his usual indifferent self, I could visibly see his body shaking with every passing scene. Almost as if he was trying his best to not give in to his emotions. Could you? Kneeling on the ground, outside of what seemed to be a rooftop, Ren's figure appeared kneeling on the ground as he glared upwards. His eyes contained an unimaginable amount of hatred. How could I? Cuckoo, I don't know. I guess I was just bored. Staring at Ren's kneeling figure, Matthew tried to hold his laughter back, but he soon burst out laughing. Coo. I'm sorry, Ren. I really had no choice. Coo. Opening his eyes wide, Ren stared at Matthew, who was laughing maniacally before him. How could you betray me like this? Bam. I can't. Turning his head away and placing his palm on the invisible wall, the memory paused. Clenching his teeth hard, Ren slowly spat. This was the day. Trembling all over, Ren's fist and jaw clenched tightly as he glared in Matthew's direction with pure hatred. This was the day my life was ruined. Vuum. Soon a thick red bloodlust started exuding from Ren's body as his eyes became bloodshot. Frowning, and seeing Ren's current state, I grabbed his shoulder and tried to snap him out of it. Chai, calm down, explain to me what happened. Schwa. Feeling his clothes getting tugged, forcefully trying to calm himself down, the bloodlust around Ren disappeared. Glancing in my direction, he said. Do you remember the potions he had given me in my previous memory?
Yeah.
Nodding my head, I remembered. How could I forget? Even I wanted to try advanced potions once. However, with the price each one went for, I could only admire them from the distance. They were cursed with a mind-breaker curse. Abruptly turning my head, I couldn't help but stare at Ren in shock. What? The mind-breaker curse. The mind-breaker curse, one of the strongest curses a demon could cast. Once cast. No matter how far, with a simple flick of their fingers, whoever was under the curse would die as soon as the demon deemed that they were no longer useful. It was an especially scary curse as it was undetectable. You wouldn't realize you were cursed before it was already too late. A demon. Huh? As my thoughts paused there, opening my eyes widely, I couldn't help but stare at Matthew in shock. Seeing that I understood, glancing back towards Matthew, Ren slowly nodded.
Yeah.
Matthew had made a contract with a demon. What? Staring at Ren for a couple of seconds, I tried to say something, but in the end, no words came out of my mouth. I don't know what happened, but ever since that last memory, Matthew changed. He became a completely different person. At first I thought he was trying his best to move on, but... Trembling, Ren covered his mouth. I only realized till it was too late. By the time I realized something strange in his behavior, he had already fallen into the depths of depression and became a villain, completely losing his sense of reasoning. The best friend I knew was gone. Watching Ren struggle to speak, I remained silent. Who knew that he had such a deep backstory? His childhood friend whom he regarded as a brother turned into a villain and in doing so cursed both his parents. Damn it. Glaring at Matthew's image in the distance, veins pooped from Ren's forehead, as his eyes turned bloodshot. From that day, I was forced to do everything he asked me to do, be it sneak inside of my parents' room to give him secret information regarding the guild operations or any other sensitive information that costed the guild quite dearly. I did his bidding for him at the expense of my parents' guild. Turning around, and looking at me in the eyes, he shouted. Because I trusted him so much, I was the reason why my parents' guild fell that hard. The 95 million you debt? All because of me leaking the secret deals that the guild was responsible for. All the friends I had made as soon as they noticed that my parents' guild was going downhill abandoned me. I soon became the school outcast. I was alone. I couldn't even glance at my parents in the eyes due to the immense guilt I felt every day. Every day was like hell to me. Pausing, Ren smiled. But it wasn't a smile of happiness. No, it was a smile full of sadness and sorrow. I did have some hope though. I somehow managed to get accepted into the lock. Suddenly, amidst the darkness, I saw a ray of hope. But that hope too was soon destroyed. D rank. That's W hat they grad my talent to be, although my parents didn't show it. I knew they were distraught with the news as they had just borrowed 30 million U from the guild with the excuse of making an investment towards my future. Glancing at the ground, Ren's eyes became hollow. His figure looked lonely and tragic. And you know what? Despite knowing I wasn't talented, they still loved me just as much as before. Moreover, they still decided to pay for the admission fee for the lock. That destroyed me, especially after what I had done. Placing his hand over where his heart was, Ren clenched it. With each passing second I lived, it felt like pieces of my heart were being torn. Peta. Grabbing onto my clothes, Ren stared at me as tears streamed down his cheeks. Ache my body, I don't care. Heck, I don't care if I cease to exist after this, but please save them, please. I beg you. I can't. Foo. Exhaling, I closed my eyes. Feeling Ren tugging my collar as he desperately looked at me with hope in his eyes, I expected such a request. From the moment he spoke about his past, I knew this moment was about to come. However, I didn't expect his story to be this tragic. The Mindbreaker Curse. One of the most notorious curses in the human domain. The one curse that has no cure, and the very same curse his parents have. Once someone was under the effect of Mindbreaker, their lives were no longer under their control. Only upon death would they be able to free themselves from the curse. Or at least that was until the latter half of the novel where Kevin manages to find the cure to the curse. I knew where to find the cure, but in the process, I would be completely destroying the plotline that I worked so hard to protect. A part of me wanted to just remain indifferent. However, memories of these past few days started flooding my mind like a broken dam. Specifically the warmth I felt these past few days. Although they weren't my real parents, I couldn't forget the care that they had given me the past few days. Maybe my emotions were still under the influence of the old Ren, but as the warm faces of my new family replayed in my mind, opening my eyes, I looked at Ren and smiled. All right. Chapter 88, When Everything Falls into Place, 1. The crescent moon high in the sky was gradually covered by dark, drifting clouds. Inside of a large park, the night lamps lit the surroundings, disconnecting the darkness that had spread throughout the environment. Who? Sitting on a bench, the faint rhythmical breathing of a youth disrupted the tranquil and silent surroundings. Ah. Waking up, I found myself sitting on a bench in the middle of the park. Squinting my eyes to familiarize myself with the lighting coming from the lamps, I rubbed my forehead. Instantly, I recalled everything that had happened inside of my consciousness. Foo. As I did, I took a deep breath. To think Ren's story was so tragic. To have his own best friend turn into a villain and in the process have him curse his very own parents as well as blackmailing him into doing his bidding. Tragic was the perfect word to describe what he went through. Remembering Ren's lonely figure as he went through his memories inside of my consciousness, I recalled focusing my attention towards his eyes. Those eyes filled with sorrow and loneliness as he shared his memories with me. Thinking back, all of this wouldn't have happened if Matthew didn't sign a pact with a demon and became a villain. As soon as he made a pact with a demon in exchange for power, Matthew lost control of his emotions, and by letting his emotions overtake his sanity, Matthew must have discarded all his previous feelings for Ren and the people he was close with for the sake of that power. In doing so, he chose to destroy Ren's life. The one person that never abandoned him. Ring. Ring. As I was staring at the moon in deep thought, my phone rang. Looking at the phone log, I instantly noticed a large notification appearing before me. Mom has called 5 times. Seeing the notification, I instantly picked up the phone. Ren. Where have you been? As I answered the call, a loud voice escaped from the speakers of the phone. Without skipping a beat, I moved the phone away from my ear. As I had seen the caller ID, I already knew this was going to happen. After making sure my mother calmed down, putting the phone back on my ear, I responded. I'm actually at the park at the moment. At the park? Well, I was training and I somehow lost track of time. In the end, that's the excuse I came up with. Since I was caught off guard by the call, that was the most plausible excuse I could use to avoid arousing any suspicion from her. Fortunately, she didn't press any further and sighed. Sigh, what am I going to do with you? All right, hurry up and come back home or else there won't be dinner for you. All right, be there soon. Be quick. Understood. Tack. Hanging up the phone, I put it in my pocket and stood up. It was time to head back home. The walk home wasn't long, about 5 minutes. It was short and relaxing. Especially with the autumn wind lightly blowing against my clothes, refreshing my mind. Midway through my journey home, I couldn't help but look back at my decision. Was I really going to interfere with the plotline for the sake of a few individuals whom I just met for a few days?
Yeah.
Ren's emotions that dwelled inside of me had somewhat affected my decision-making process. Maybe I was impulsive when answering Ren, but a part of me feels that that wasn't the only reason that prompted me to make a move. There was something else, but I just quite couldn't place my finger on it. Only with due time will I be able to determine what I was feeling. If it were the old me, I would have refused Ren's request without hesitation, and this mainly had to do with my personality. There was a reason why I always wanted to keep the plotline intact. Control. That's what mattered to me. I was fine with the plotline changing as long as the major events didn't change, at least to the point where I still had a general idea of what was to come in the future. I guess it mostly had to do with my personality, but I just wanted everything to be under my control. I didn't like when things didn't go as I dictated. I disliked being put into situations where I wasn't in control of the flow. Especially if my meddling would result in the Demon King appearing way earlier than he should have. If that happened, then all the preparation I had made in order to fight him would become useless. Maybe if I was strong like Kevin I wouldn't have cared, but I wasn't. For someone like me, every little detail mattered. If I suddenly took a cheat item and my action resulted in Kevin's death in the process, what was I supposed to do? Replace him? No. That was not something I was willing to do. I wasn't someone who wanted to bear the responsibility of saving the world. That responsibility weighed heavier than anyone could possibly imagine. I was no hero, nor did I wish to become one. I didn't have a grand goal or anything like that per se. As long as the universe didn't get destroyed by the hands of the Demon King, I was content. That's why I was so obsessed with keeping the plotline fixed. So that I could fight the Demon King with the most optimal preparations.
Ha!
Sighing, I could only lament the fact that that was no longer possible. Especially since I needed to find the cure for the Mindbreaker curse, an extremely terrifying curse that dictated someone's life and death. In the future, towards the ending of the second volume, Kevin and his friend would be put in a position where they would have to find the cure for the curse at all cost. In the process of finding the cure, they will go through many trials that will shape their character as well as improve their strength. Many schemes made by the demons would end up being destroyed in the process. Though it wasn't the most important arc, it was still very important for their character development. If I chose to go find the cure for the curse, my actions would definitely cause a butterfly effect, but I just wasn't sure how big. Fortunately, time was on my side. Because my parents' guild was already on the verge of collapse, Matthew had no use for me. The only reason he used to blackmail the Oldren was so that he could weaken my parents' guild. Although the Oldren didn't tell me, I could pretty much guess the motives behind Matthew's blackmailing. He wanted to absorb Galxicus. With the fact that his father owned a gold-graded guild, wanting to absorb smaller silver-graded guilds wasn't strange. In fact, it was quite common. However, the process usually took a very long time, hence why they tried to use all sorts of dirty tricks in the book to try to force them to sell the guild to them. Knowing this fact, I knew that I wasn't pressed for time. Before he would completely kill my parents, due to them no longer having any use, he would first need to completely absorb Glaxicus, which by my estimation would take approximately 1 year. And this was ideal since I needed to make a lot of preparations. Finding the cure for the curse wasn't going to be easy, no, I would say it would probably be one of the most dangerous trips I would ever make. However, it wouldn't be all for nothing. In fact, the trip wouldn't just consist of me finding a cure. Perhaps this was the other reason why I chose to accept Ren's request, but there was an item I was extremely interested in. More specifically, one that was tailor-made for one of the future members of my mercenary group. Named after Artemis, the goddess of animals, the ultimate beast tamer cheat item. The Flute of Artemis. An item that allowed beast tamers to control multiple beasts at a time. The item that helped Ava's monster tamer class shine in the original novel, prompting her into becoming one of the strongest humans in the novel. Well, although I said all of that, there was just one teeny tiny problem. The place I wanted to go get the cure wasn't actually on Earth. Chapter 89, When Everything Falls into Place, 2. Kaisa, Headquarters. Here are all the files of the people you requested for me to find. All right, thanks. Without glancing at Small Snake on my left, I took the files from his hand and threw them on the desk I was currently working on. A week had passed since I learned about Ren's past, and nothing changed. The renovations for the warehouse were pretty much done. With my limited budget, I could only redecorate the place to make it look more presentable, but there really wasn't any high-tech equipment nor training rooms here yet. I was too poor for that. What are you doing? Seeing me discard the files he had just given me, rolling his eyes, Small Snake couldn't help but ask. I'm making preparations. Preparations for? Well, let's just say that in 4 months I'll be going on a long trip with a couple of people. Frowning, Small Snake couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. If it's in 4 months, why do you need to start making preparations now? You wouldn't believe me even if I told you. I will be going to find a cure for a curse that has been universally acknowledged as something that didn't have a cure. Was what I wanted to say, but he wouldn't believe me even if I told him so. Moreover, I also didn't tell him that I was not going to be on Earth throughout that whole trip. So may as well just dodge the question. Speechless, Small Snake could only pinch the middle of his brows as he continued. Anyhow, I did look at the profiles of the people you had previously recommended to join our mercenary group, and I still don't understand why you want them. Taking the file that I threw on the desk, Small Snake opened it and took out 3 profiles. I sort of understand why you want to recruit Ryan Polive, but why a monster tamer and an old mercenary? Pointing towards Eva's and Leopold's files, Small Snake frowned. Isn't the monster tamer class useless since they can only control one beast? Moreover, from what I've been told, the beast they tame can't even increase in strength. Without glancing at Small Snake, I continued scribbling on a piece of paper. What he said wasn't wrong. Monster tamers weren't very sought after due to their limitations with regards to how many beasts they could tame. Normally 1, on rare occasions 2. Moreover, the beasts that they could tame couldn't become stronger. Their strength was fixed. Meaning that if you tamed a ranked beast, that was it. No matter how much food you fed to it or how much time you spent training it, the beast was forever going to stay at rank. Unless you got a new one, you couldn't raise its rank. And that's where the real problem laid. The expenses needed to sustain a monster tamer were astronomical. The costs of capturing and feeding a ranked beast probably amounted to the same costs needed to raise multiple ranked heroes. It just wasn't worth it. Don't even get me started about the mercenary. Seeing that I was still scribbling stuff, Small Snake continued. From what I've found in the files, he seems to be a regular member with seemingly no outdash. Stop. Sigh. Putting my pen down, I leaned on my chair and looked at Small Snake and sighed. Small Snake, just trust me. I know what I'm doing. Flick. Flicking the pen that was rolling down on my paper, I continued. You think I would just choose random people without having put much thought into it? Shaking his head, Small Snake responded. No. Then what's the point of asking? Just wait and I will prove to you that my judgment wasn't wrong. Frowning for a second, Small Snake eventually nodded his head. All right. Seeing Small Snake nod, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Although Small Snake was a very capable person, he tended to question my every decision. Well, he wasn't wrong in doing so. I mean, apart from the C.B. Pharmaceuticals incident, he hasn't really seen the full extent of my abilities. Nor did he know I was the author of this novel. It wasn't wrong of him to doubt me. Especially since he didn't know what I had in store for the members I was planning on recruiting. In the end, with due time, Small Snake will eventually understand what I was doing. Any other problems? Yes, actually. Smiling, my brows twitched. You weren't supposed to answer that. Shaking his head and ignoring my rumbling, Small Snake continued. According to the information inside of the files, Ryan Polive, the 12-year-old kid that you were keen on recruiting, is currently being scouted by a gold-graded guild. Gold-graded?
Yeah.
Resting my face on my hand, I softly mumbled. This is indeed a problem. A gold-graded guild. I knew that Ryan was currently being scouted by a gold-graded guild, but that still didn't change the fact that this was a problem. Guilds were divided into 5 different ranks: bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and diamond. In order for a guild to be classified in the gold ranks, it meant that they had to at least have someone who was ranked in their guild. For platinum, they had to have at least one ranked hero, and for diamond, be ranked. So far the strongest opponent I faced was around rank, and that was already with me exploiting openings that others had made for me. Fighting against AB rank with my current strength was suicidal. As my thoughts paused this far, a smile appeared on my face. But who said anything about me fighting against them openly? Turning my attention back to Small Snake, I ordered. Small Snake, send me all of the information regarding the gold-graded guild that wants to recruit my future member. From their enemies, details regarding their guild master, the top executives as well as their families, make sure you miss nothing. I want to know their habits, their friends, their enemies, everything. What? Frowning, Small Snake couldn't but be even more confused. Just what would he need all that information for? Was he planning on blackmailing them? There's no way he thought the top executives of a gold-graded guild would think people wouldn't target their families. The more Rin spoke, the more Small Snake became confused. Smiling at Small Snake's confused face, I interlocked my fingers and rested my chin on them. Glancing at him, I asked. Small Snake, what do you do when you find yourself against an opponent who is way stronger than you? You run? Shaking my head, I couldn't help but look at Small Snake in disapproval. Small Snake, grow some balls. What are you? Raising my hand, I stopped him from speaking. Small Snake, you don't have to be the strongest person in the world in order to beat a strong opponent, no. Raising my finger, I pointed towards my head. Regardless of how strong someone is, if they can't outsmart you, they can never win. Unless they had power that was overwhelming to the point no trickery nor scheme could win, there was always a solution, you just need to find that solution. Vroom. Tapping on my watch, a huge chessboard appeared on top of my desk. Yawning, I stretched my back and started a game. As I did, I started speaking. Unless you're a god, no being is perfect. Tack. Moving my pawn forward to start the game, I glanced at Small Snake. Everyone has a weakness, regardless of how much they try to hide it, be it big or small, hidden or not hidden, they all have a weakness. Take Achilles for example. Despite the fact that he was invulnerable to anything, as soon as an arrow pierced his weakness, the heel, he like everyone else on the battlefield died. Tack. 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 As I talked, in real time, the pieces on the chessboard automatically moved, matching my tempo. Regardless of how strong your opponent was, once you found their weakness you could exploit it to your advantage. Tack. As I talked, focusing my mind on the game, I looked at the ever-changing pieces and made the appropriate moves. The more time passed, the lower the number of pieces on the board remained. Staring at the game before him, Small Snake looked at my calm face and couldn't help but ask. But what if you don't know what their weakness is? Looking at Small Snake, I smirked. Can't find it? Then, just make one. Moving the rook all the way down the now empty board, it soon appeared below another rook, blocking the defenseless king. Be it through the use of deception, schemes, money, connections, information, if used well, an opening will definitely appear, and then... Tack. Checkmate. Game over, you won. As Small Snake listened, watching the game unfold before his eyes, although he agreed somewhat, he couldn't help but frown. Are you saying that you alone can go against a gold-graded guild? Smiling mysteriously, I didn't answer. In 2 days you'll know. After a bit of silence, Small Snake nodded his head. All right, I'm very curious of what you'll do. Small Snake was indeed curious. The reason why he joined the mercenary group was mainly out of his own curiosity. If he thought about it, apart from the pharmaceuticals incident, he never really saw Ren doing anything grand. Sure, the fact that he knew his circumstances regarding the monolith has also shocked him, but that didn't mean he fully trusted Ren's abilities. He talked a lot, but he never really proved to him that his decision was worthy of his trust. Perhaps this could be a great opportunity to be able to determine if his decision in joining him was the right decision. Thinking thus far, Small Snake sighed and switched the topic. Anyhow, regarding the mercenary Leopold Ray, I think we should be able to recruit him if we just pay him enough money. He is a mercenary after all, but there's just one problem. Frowning, my mouth twitched. How come there was a problem for everything? Why couldn't something just go smoothly for once? Sighing and massaging my forehead, I asked. What is it? Pausing, and looking at me in the eyes, Small Snake hesitated for a moment before saying. We don't have any money. Silence swept the warehouse. Kiam, don't worry about it. I'll solve it by the end of the week. Disrupting the silence, coughing to hide my embarrassment, I leaned on my chair. Money. Fucking money. Whenever I wanted to do something, money was always the first thing that troubled me. With the cost for my training, warehouse renovations, taxes, and other useless expenses I was now poor. There was just never enough money. I did have a couple of short-term solutions that would allow me to make a lot of money, but in the end, if I wanted to sustain a whole mercenary group, I needed to think more broadly. I need to create a steady source of income. And fortunately for me, a plan had already started formulating in my head. Chapter 90, When Everything Falls into Place, 3. A steady source of income. That's what I needed. Although stocks could help me make a lot of money, in the end, it wasn't really a long-term solution. That mainly had to do with the fact that the time frame for each event differed greatly. There wasn't really going to be another incident similar to that of C.B. Pharmaceuticals where I could make quick cash in a span of a few days. At least not anytime soon. Moreover, with the fact that the plotline was slowly changing, I wasn't even sure whether the events will continue to go as the story dictated. It was no longer the most optimal option that I could take to make money. In the end, after a lot of thinking, I came up with a solution. Creating my own company. With me being the creator of this world, I obviously knew a lot of things. Especially with regards to the world. From stocks, fashion trends, and products that will sweep the market in the future. I knew everything. With that being the case, a plan had already started formulating in my head. I was going to create a business empire that on paper wasn't affiliated to my mercenary organization, but in reality was secretly funding our every endeavor. With this, as both my mercenary organization and my business grew, the stronger my influence inside of Ashton City would become. I had realized that just focusing on keeping the plotline intact was useless. No one knew what would happen in the future. Especially since I tended to do things that in a way changed the plotline. It was too passive of an approach. I shouldn't just rely on the security that the plotline gave me in order to fight the Demon King. I needed to have reassurances. I needed something to support me. I needed to secretly grow an empire that would rival the likes of the Union. One that was there yet not there. A secret organization that ruled the shadows. And when everything was set in place, everything would be within my grasp. Rather than be a chess piece, be the one that moves the chess piece. By the time the Demon King descended, I would have made enough preparations to fight back. Yes. That's what I had to do. However, although this sounded nice and all, I needed to approach this carefully. One step at a time. Like they all say. Rome wasn't built in a day. My first goal right now was to establish a functioning business. I already had several products in mind that I could introduce in the market, however, that wasn't my first priority. My first priority was finding a sponsor. Honestly, with me having read a lot of novels in my time, I instantly knew what would happen as soon as the products I introduced hit the market. It would instantly attract the attention of the big shots. They would instantly either try to remove the company from the market or outright threaten them. This was just how the world worked. And honestly, I wasn't too keen on wasting my time dealing with these sorts of problems. That's why a sponsor was necessary. One that was big enough to deter the competitions from finding trouble. And I knew exactly the right person to ask. As the sun brightly lit the surroundings, inside of a busy train station, an air train slowly descended towards one of the platforms of the station. Vroom. Stepping off the air train, I inhaled the fresh autumn air that lingered in the atmosphere. This is the right station, right? Checking my phone, I double-checked with the information Small Snake sent me and made sure I was in the right location. Northern District, Libansa Station. Looking at the station sign, and confirming I was in the right location, I headed out of the station. As I walked out, tapping on my phone, I once again checked Ryan's profile. Name, Ryan Palev. Age, 12. Job, none. Potential, S, current, unranked. Description, lives with single mother inside of a worn-down one-bedroom apartment. Currently being eyed by gold-graded Guild Luxius. Has been approached multiple times with no success. However, it seems like they currently have had a breakthrough as the mother and son duo have scheduled to make an appointment with them in the next few days at their house. Target blood type is A, height is ==============================================================================================================================〕 the information, I looked at the date on which the appointment was made. Today, huh? Fortunately, I wasn't late and Ryan had still not been recruited by gold-graded Guild. He was going to be an essential member of my mercenary group. I couldn't afford for him to tragically die like in the story. Bishop. That's the position I had planned on giving him. With him and Small Snake controlling the behind-the-scenes of the mercenary group, I didn't have to worry about our operations failing. Just imaging myself doing missions in the fastest and most efficient way possible sent shivers down my spine. With one being meticulous and organized whilst the other calculating and perceptive, all sorts of variables during the missions would instantly be analyzed by both of them.
Ah.
What a frightening duo. Knock. Knock. Outside of a rundown apartment complex, two muscular men wearing a black suit and a black tie knocked on the door of one of the apartments. Who is it? A couple of seconds after the knock was heard, a crisp and pleasant voice echoed from the other side of the door. Ma'am, we are from the Luxius Guild. We are here for your answer regarding the recruitment of your son Ryan Polive, said one of the men in black suit. Hearing that the individuals were from the Luxius Guild, after a short pause, the sound of rushed footsteps rumbled through the other side of the door.
Ah.
Yes. Clank. Opening the door, a middle-aged lady with glossy black hair and few wrinkles on the corner of her eyes appeared in front of the two individuals dressed in black suits. Trembling, she politely bowed in front of them and said, "Thank you for coming." Nodding his head, one of the two individuals indifferently glanced at the lady before getting straight to the point. "Sure, have you considered our proposal?" Freezing for a split second, the lady tried to hide her trembling hand and curtly bowed one more time. "I'm sorry. He is still 12 years old. I can know that my son is very smart, but I want for him to have a normal childhood." "I see." Nodding his head, the individual on the right looked at the individual on the left. Glancing back, they remained silent for a couple of seconds before nodding their heads. "We understand, ma'am." "Are really?" Looking up, and seeing the two men dressed in suits nod their heads, the middle-aged lady sighed in relief. "Thank you very much for you and Kiowa. Vuam." Before the lady could finish speaking, an overbearing pressure bore down on her. Instantly she fell on the ground. "I guess we have to do this the hard way, don't we?" Staring at the lady on the ground, one of two individuals dressed in a suit glanced at the entrance of the house. Peeking his head from behind the door, a young child with black hair looked towards the two individuals dressed in black standing in front of the door. His eyes soon landed on his mom, who was on the ground unable to move. Shocked, he couldn't help but scream, "Mom! Is that him?" Staring at the young kid peeking from behind the door of the house, the two individuals looked at each other. They soon smiled. Noticing their expression, Ryan's mom couldn't help but look towards Ryan as she shouted, "Ryan, close the door. Do it." Bam! Blocking the door with his foot, a large shadow cast over both Ryan and the middle-aged lady. "Ma'am, I think you need to put more thought into th. Oh my, would you look at this?" Just as the lady was about to despair, disrupting their conversation, a cheerful voice entered everyone's ears. As two arms hooked on the shoulders of the two individuals dressed in black suits, a youth with jet black hair and blue eyes leisurely looked at them with a warm yet leisurely smile. "My friends, how about you try to recruit me instead? I am very good with the sword." Chapter 91, When Everything Falls into Place, 4. A day prior to my meeting with Ryan. Sitting inside of a cafe, frowning, I looked through the files that Small Snake had sent me. Honestly, although I teased and abused Small Snake quite a bit, I couldn't deny how capable of an individual he was. Within a day I had every little detail regarding Luxius I could ever hope to have. From the top members to the lowest members. I had information on basically everyone. If that wasn't all, Small Snake also sent me a long list of information regarding the guilds that they were currently not on good terms with. And as I looked through their enemy guild, one of them caught my attention. Sword of Light. Another gold-graded guild that was located not far off from Luxius. However, compared to the other guilds that Luxius had conflicts with, their enmity against Luxius wasn't actually between the guild masters. In fact, they didn't really have any significant problems with each other. However, one piece of info caught my attention. Conflict between the sons of both guilds' guild masters, Jacob Reed and Nolan Valdev. This was a very interesting piece of news. A very interesting one. The conflict wasn't between the two guild masters but in fact between their sons, or more like the guild heirs. Moreover, as I looked through the information regarding their conflicts, a smile appeared on my face. A plan had already started formulating inside of my mind. Without pause, I discarded every other file other than that of Luxius and Sword of Light. I had decided that they were now going to be my main focus. Taking out a piece of paper, I drew two circles. One signaling Luxius and the other signaling Sword of Light. Like a mind map, I drew little branches coming out from each circle. With each branch, I would write small notes. Like that, for the next 2 hours, I continuously drew different branches coming out from each circle. Soon the paper was filled to the brim with branches, and a massive web of information was detailed on it. Phoo. Putting my pen down, I took a deep breath. I was done. I had written everything important regarding both guilds and branched out the information in hopes to find as many links as possible between the two, and midway through, I found what I wanted. The one link that would allow me to flawlessly execute my plan. Chuckling, I bit the tip of my pen. If everything went as I predicted, Luxius will completely forget everything regarding Ryan and his potential, allowing me to recruit him peacefully. Once again looking at the mind map, a smile appeared on my face. Everything was starting to come together. My goal wasn't to destroy a gold-graded guild. No, that would bring too much unnecessary attention. My goal right now was to change their current focus. Redirected it away from Ryan but towards somewhere else. Putting the mind map away, I texted Small Snake and asked him to purchase a few things. I then proceeded to send him 4 photos with instructions on them. Send. Sending the photos to Small Snake, I took Ryan's profile out and checked his current situation. Soon, my eyes landed on an important piece of information. Target has made an appointment to meet with Luxius at Target House on November 25th, 2055 early morning. November 25th? Isn't that tomorrow? Checking the date, I realized that tomorrow Ryan would be meeting with Luxius. That works. Pausing and checking my phone, I realized that tomorrow was the perfect time for me to start the plan that I had come up with. Scrolling through my phone, I quickly booked an air train for tomorrow. Cleaning up my desk, I stood up and left the cafe. I guess I won't be sleeping tonight. Back to the present. My friends, how about you try to recruit me instead? I am very good with the sword. Hooking my arms around the 2 individuals wearing black suits, I winked at them. Who are you, KHH? Flabbergasted, the 2 individuals tried to turn their heads to get a better look at me, however, smiling, I increased the grip on their necks. Like hell was I gonna let them see my face filled with charm. KHHH. Feeling the grip on their necks tighten, the 2 individuals struggled to breathe. Desperate, using both arms, they tried to pull my arm away from their necks. As they pulled, veins appeared on top of their foreheads. Yet, despite how much they struggled, my arms wouldn't budge. As time passed, the weaker their struggle became. Just as they were about to give up, one of the 2 individuals caught sight of something hidden beneath one of the sleeves of my arms. An emblem of a bull with a cross. And as soon as he saw the emblem, the air around him intensified and he fully released his ranked pressure. Almost as if he had regained all of his energy. Futile effort. Noticing the change, I shook my head. Now that I was ranked, such low pressure didn't even tickle me. Lowering my head, I looked at the 2 men in between my arms. Fellas, let me be honest with you, I'm dirt poor at the moment, please put in a good word to your boss. I really can't afford to be unemployed at the moment. Struggling to speak, one of the two individuals looked at me and said, "Khiknow ho sin you." What? Lowering my head to better understand what they were saying, I innocently looked at the two individuals in between my arms. Their faces were now incomparably red. STKHH. As my frown deepened, I lowered my head even further. Hey, say something, I can't hear you. Hearing nothing, glancing at them, I soon noticed that their eyes had become white. They passed out. Releasing my grip on the two individuals, their bodies fell on the ground with a large thud. 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 Scratching my head, looking at the two individuals on the floor, I couldn't help but say, I guess I held on to them a little bit too tightly. With me being a rank higher than them, they were totally helpless. I guess ranks do make that much of a difference, I mean, they couldn't even put up a fight against my grip. With that, a smile appeared on my face as I glanced at Ryan, who was hiding behind his mom. Are you guys okay? Seeing me look at them, the mother and son flinched slightly. Smiling apologetically, I extended my hand to help them up. I'm sorry you had to see that. Warily glancing at my hand, the mother moved forward and hid Ryan behind her. What do you want from us? Not minding their apprehension towards me, I looked at Ryan, who was hiding behind his mother, and awkwardly said, Well, how should I say this, I'm also here to recruit Ryan. You're the same as them. Glaring and pointing at me, Ryan's mom desperately hugged Ryan, trying to protect him. Please don't misunderstand. Please hear my offer out first. Noticing the situation turning out for the worst, I raised my hands and backed off. It was better if I didn't push it. Whilst still holding Ryan in between her arms, the mother spoke. We won't accept any offer. Please leave. Okay. Seeing how hostile they were towards me, I made my way out of the house. I knew that negotiating with them at the moment would end up being fruitless. I'll leave this here. Check it out if you have time. But of course, just because I was leaving didn't mean I was giving up. Taking out a file from my dimensional space, I placed it on the ground. Glancing at Ryan and his mother, I pointed towards the file. In case you're bored, I left the contract that I was planning on offering Ryan. If you choose to accept my offer, please call the number that I left inside of the papers. If you wish to refuse, just ignore everything that happened, though I do have to say that working with me would be much better than working with Luxius. Finished with what I wanted to say, grabbing the two individuals on the floor, I opened the door with my foot and headed out. All right, I've wasted enough of your time.
Goodbye.
Now. Clank. Closing the door behind me, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Glancing at the two individuals in my arms, I shook my head and brought them with me. I still had a use for them. Chapter 92, When Everything Falls into Place, 5. Kaisa, Headquarters. Phew. Sitting on my desk, I blew on the bangs of my hair. As I was doing so, from time to time, I would check my phone. Nothing yet, huh? After 10 minutes of continuously checking my phone, I sighed. It looks like things are progressing more slowly than I predicted. What are you doing? Small Snake? Glancing towards Small Snake, who had just arrived, I leaned back on my chair and continued to blow on the bangs of my hair. Noticing my attitude, Small Snake didn't even bother to ask what I was doing. Has everything with the Luxius Guild been sorted? Checking my watch, without glancing at Small Snake, I said. Not yet, should be soon though. How soon? Thinking for a bit, I said I'd say in about an hour or so. Raising his brow, Small Snake couldn't help but ask, an hour? Then is everything that is happening outside all because of you? With my eyes half open, I briefly glanced at Small Snake. I guess you could say that. Frowning, Small Snake paused before he said. Just what the hell did you do? It's a bit of a long story. Vroom. Tapping on my phone, a huge chessboard appeared before me and Small Snake. Fancy a game of chess while I recount? To be honest, I'm on the verge of passing out from boredom. Glancing at the chessboard, Small Snake sighed and sat in front of me. Chess? Regular rules? Yup. All right. Nodding his head, Small Snake stared at the chessboard before him. He was currently using the black pieces, thus he would have to start after I moved my piece. So, tell me what you did? What I did? Staring at the chessboard for a brief moment, I looked at Small Snake and smiled. I just moved the pieces one at a time. Frowning, Small Snake couldn't help but shake his head. I don't know what you mean by that, but you seriously have a chess complex. I do. I guess you aren't wrong. Taken aback for a moment, I couldn't find any words to refute his statement. Now that I thought about it, I really did, didn't I? From the guild name and structure to the way I talked, I made a lot of chess references. I guess I really did have some sort of chess complex. Tack. Sighing, moving my pawn forward, I smiled. Let's begin. Standing in line, outside of a black sedan, parked below a tall skyscraper, 5 individuals wearing black suits and sunglasses stood upright. Each individual vigilantly looked towards their surroundings as none dared to speak a word to each other. It was evident that they were professionals. Clank. Coming out from the skyscraper entrance, a youth wearing an Iron Designer t-shirt and black pants headed straight for the black sedan. As he walked down the stairs towards the sedan, the bodyguards couldn't help but notice an elegant yet prideful bearing coming out from the youth's body. Almost as if he was a lone, untouchable phoenix. Nodding his head towards the guards, the youth opened the door of the car and entered. Following his entrance, from all sides, the guards too entered the car. Sitting at the front, wearing white gloves, the driver of the car turned around and politely smiled towards Nolan. Young master, where would you like to go? Playing with his phone, Nolan disinterestedly said. Not sure, do you have any suggestions? Smiling, the driver said. Young Master Nolan, according to some sources, it seems that Jacob from the Luxius Guild is currently staying in the Ola Bar in Paltor Street not so far from here. Listening to the information, taking his eyes off of his phone, a smile appeared on Nolan's face. Jacob is there. That is indeed interesting, all right, let's go there. Nodding his head, a trace of amusement appeared in Nolan's eyes. I'll show that bastard why he shouldn't have messed with me. Smiling, the driver nodded his head and turned his focus back on the wheel. Vroom. Soon the car silently sped into the distance. Tack. Moving a pawn forward, Small Snake glanced at me and asked. So you disguised yourself as a driver? Is that the identity of one of the people you asked me to make a face mask of? Tack. Moving another one of my pawns, I nodded my head. Spot on. Tack. Staring the chessboard, and pondering for a second, Small Snake moved a pawn and nodded his head. I sort of get the gist of the situation now. Tack. Without glancing at him, nor showing any sign of shock, I raised my brow and asked. Oh. What did you figure out? Tack. Placing another pawn down, Small Snake looked at me before saying. Your plan is to instigate a conflict between the two guilds by creating conflict between the two heirs. This way, both guilds will have an excuse to fight each other, but although the plan sounds solid, it's honestly full of holes. Tack. Placing my pawn down, I smiled at Small Snake. Well, you aren't entirely wrong about the fact that I am indeed trying to create a conflict between the two of them, but that isn't my main goal. Pausing, Small Snake glanced at me and frowned. Really? Then what is it? Smiling, I didn't respond. Tack. Taking the knight, I moved it upwards in an L shape. You'll see soon. After a 20-minute drive, arriving at the location, Nolan alongside his 5 guards exited the vehicle. So did the driver. Vroom. 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 As they inched closer, the loud rumbling music coming from the nightclub reverberated throughout the whole surroundings, shaking the ground beneath them. Please excuse me. Just as they were about to enter the nightclub, a bulky individual stopped them at the entrance. Please provide an ID. He dash. Just as one of the guards was about to protest, raising his hands, Nolan shook his head and took out an ID from his pocket. Here. Handing it to the guard, Nolan smiled politely. A couple of seconds after, coming back from having checked the card, the guard flusteredly gave it back to Nolan. Mr. Nolan, I apologize for not recognizing you immediately. It's okay, no worries. Laughing, Nolan took the card back and made his way towards the club. Entering the nightclub, Nolan looked left and right until finally, after a couple of seconds, he managed to spot a youth sitting in the corner of the place. Walking up to the youth, Nolan smirked as he looked down on him. Fancy seeing you here, Jacob. Looking up, a fairly handsome youth with fair skin and sharp brows looked in Nolan's direction. Recognizing him, clenching his teeth, he hatefully spat. Nolan. Long time no see, buddy. As the two stared at each other, sparks appeared between their eyes. Soon the air around the nightclub started becoming tense. Nolan and Jacob had only known each other for about a year. However, during that year they met, they had continuously targeted each other. Always trying to look for trouble for one another. Their conflicts didn't particularly start big. In fact, the reason why they fought in the first place wasn't anything particularly exciting. The reason why they disliked each other was simply because at the time they met, they were each with a friend who had some enmity with the other's friend. Naturally, since they were their friend's enemies, they were their enemies too. With that, standing up for their friends, the two stood on the opposite side of each other. And thus they became enemies. And ever since then, their conflicts have never ended. Because they were both respectively heirs to a gold-graded guild, their pride was naturally inflated. As such, until there was a clear winner between them, they were always destined to fight against each other. Thus, since their first meeting, they had always been trying to look trouble for one another until the other gave up or admitted defeat. Standing up, Jacob's figure, which was more robust and taller than Nolan's, looked down on him. You came here to redeem yourself for your last loss. Raising his brow, Nolan looked up at Jacob. Smirking, he said. What loss? I clearly remember beating the crap out of you. Remember how you broke your nose? As Jacob and Nolan stood face to face, their auras progressively intensified. Stop making stuff up. Oh. I remember taking photos of your pathetic self. If you want, I can send them to you later. You dare. You think I'm scared of you? Vroom. Vroom. Soon, 2 ranked auras swept the nightclub. Instantly, the atmosphere around the bar became tense. Both sides were currently on a standoff, but neither moved. Everyone that was in the bar, sensing the atmosphere, either left or distanced themselves from Nolan and Jacob. Around them, the guards stood firm. Just as both sides were about to make a move, a subtle clicking sound resounded across the space. Following that, the whole room died white for a split second, almost as if a bolt of lightning had descended. Click! Following the clicking sound, an arm flew in the air. Soon after, the room froze. No one spoke a word. Everything happened so fast that no one caught sight of what happened and who did it. Too fast. Coo-wah. Soon a blood-curdling scream broke the silence as Jacob held onto the area where his arm used to be. Young Master Jacob! Panicked, the guards around Jacob immediately ran in his direction. Taking out a couple of potions, they immediately fed them to him in hopes of stopping the bleeding. You dare! With bloodshot eyes, holding onto his arm, Jacob glared intensely towards Nolan. His eyes were that of pure undisputed hatred. Killing intent permeated the air. What the tea wasn't us? Shocked, Nolan took a few steps back. He really had no idea what had happened. One moment Jacob was standing before him, the next his arm flew in the air. How dare you! Glancing towards his guards, Jacob, using his only hand, pointed towards Nolan and shouted. Attack them, it's an order. I don't care what you do, make sure he dies. Yes. Heeding Jacob's order, the guards instantly attacked. Boom! Soon an explosion reverberated across the club as dust and debris flew everywhere. Creak! As explosions reverberated throughout the nightclub and the two parties fought, exiting from the back of the nightclub, wearing a black suit and white gloves, Nolan's driver exited the nightclub from the back door. Smiling, he mumbled. Mission accomplished. Extending his hand over his head, a mask slowly peeled off of his face. Claw. Underneath the moonlight, his real face was revealed. Smirking, Nolan's driver walked over to a secluded area of a parking lot and removed a big white sheet revealing a slick black bike. Jumping on top of the bike, the individual sat on the bike and sped off in the distance. Vroom. However, as he took off into the distance with his bike, what he didn't notice was a small camera secretly hidden in the corner of the nightclub. It recorded everything. From the moment he exited the building, to the very moment he took off his mask and the face beneath it was revealed. Chapter 93, When Everything Falls into Place, 6. Hold up. Just as Small Snake was about to place his piece down, he frowned. Did you just say that a camera caught you taking off your mask? Lazily supporting my chin with my arm, I nodded. Yup. Confused, Small Snake tilted his head and frowned. Isn't that bad? I mean dash. Seeing Small Snake's confusion, before he could continue, I cut him off. Well, that is if what they saw was my real face. Coming to an understanding, Small Snake's brows relaxed. So you didn't reveal your face? Nodding my head, I pointed at the board, urging for him to continue. Don't you remember the photos I sent you? The ones you used to create multiple face masks for me? Tack. Moving one of the pieces, Small Snake nodded his head.
Yeah.
He did. Although he didn't know who the people in the photos were, Small Snake remembered receiving a text a couple of days ago regarding the creation of a couple of skin masks. With current technology, creating such high-detailed masks didn't take much, so he had it promptly made the next day. Seeing that he understood, I lethargically said. Well, I was wearing two at that time. Tack. With one of my eyes closed, I moved my bishop diagonally across the board. I see, and whose mask does the other one belong to? Hearing his question, I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I answered with another question. Small Snake, who do you think stands to gain the most from the conflict between Sword of Light and Luxius? Getting answered back with a question, Small Snake thought for a moment before hesitantly saying. The ones who wins between them. Shaking my head, I lightly smiled. Tut, 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 not necessarily true. Tack. Moving one of his pieces, Small Snake frowned. Then who? Smiling, I glanced at him and said. Have you ever heard of the term, the mantis stalks the cicada unaware of the oriole behind? Nodding his head, pausing and thinking for a moment, Small Snake's eyes widened. You don't mean. Tack. Yup. Luxius headquarters, 80th floor. Overlooking the city from the tainted windows of the high-rise building, a tall muscular man interlocked his fingers behind his back. A cold and indifferent aura exuded from his body. Briefly glancing towards the bottom of the building, towards the busy streets of Ashton City, the tall man coldly spoke. Victor, has there been any news regarding the 2 people we sent to recruit that kid that caught my eye? No, we tried contacting them, but so far, we haven't heard from them yet. Standing a few feet away from the muscular man, a man dressed in a simple gray suit curtly replied. Hearing the reply, after a short pause, the tall man's brows furrowed. Strange. Noticing the guild master thinking, the gray suit individual asked. Guild master, what are your orders? Bang. Just as the guild master of Luxius, Patrick Reed, was about to speak, the sound of the door smashing reverberated across the space as an individual wearing a black suit hurriedly ran into the room with a report in his hand. Emergency report. Young master has gotten into a conflict inside of a nightclub. Frowning, an invisible pressure instantly bore down on the individual that had just rushed into the room. KHHH. Thud. Feeling the pressure bearing down on him, the subordinate that had just barged into the office felt his knees give out as he knelt on the ground of the office space. Obviously angered by the sudden intrusion, Patrick coldly spat as he glanced at his subordinate. You better have a good reason for suddenly barging into my office like that. How is this piece of news deemed to be an emergency? Speak your next words carefully. Gulp. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, trembling, the individual started speaking. Why young master got into a conflict and... Gulp. Hesitating, swallowing another gulp of saliva, the poor man continued. Low st an arm in the process. Vowum. Bam. Instantly a tremendous pressure shrouded the whole office space as the furniture around the room was obliterated into dust. Papers flew everywhere, and the whole room shook. Trembling, Patrick looked towards the kneeling subordinate and slowly said. Repeat what you said, recount me everything carefully. Feeling Patrick's gaze on him, without a second thought, the subordinate nodded his head. Why yes, according to the report, Yunji Master Jacob got into conflict with Nolan Valdev, son of current guild master of Sword of Light. Frowning, the aura around Patrick slightly dissipated as he said. Sword of Light? Nolan? Continue. Repeating the words inside of his mind, nodding his head slightly, Patrick gestured for his subordinate to continue reading the report. Being told to continue, without a second thought, the subordinate instantly started speaking again. Why yes, according to the reports, as the 2 were in the middle of a conflict inside of the nightclub, out of nowhere, someone attacked Jacob. The result was his arm getting detached from his body. KHH. Once again, a massive overbearing pressure started emanating from Patrick's body. Oh. Since when was Sword of Light that impulsive? To think they actually dared to make a move against their son. How daring of Sword of Light. It looks like Sword of Light didn't regard Luxius as an opponent. Clenching his fists tightly, Patrick turned towards Victor who stood by the side and coldly said. Immediately summon all of our high-ranking members. In a week's time, I want everything prepared. Prepare the paperwork. We are going to declare a guild war against Sword of Light. Shocked by the news, Victor's eyes opened wide as he couldn't help but exclaim. Guild Master. With an expressionless face, Patrick once again stared at the city below him. It doesn't matter if the opponent is another gold grade guild, if you hurt my son, I'll make sure to return everything with interest. Tack. Placing my pawn down, I glanced at Small Snake and smiled as I spoke. And so the guild master of Luxius will most likely prepare for a guild war. Taken aback, Small Snake's hand, which was holding onto a pawn, paused. Looking at me, he couldn't help but ask. A guild war? Yes. Nodding my head I confirmed. If everything went according to my predictions, as soon as the guild master of Luxius found out what had happened to his son, he would without a doubt start preparing for a guild war. This was inevitable. He only had one son. Now that he lost an arm, he, without a doubt, would instantly try to fight against the person responsible for crippling his son. And the only way he could do that was through a guild war. A guild war was something that the central government established to legally resolve conflicts between guilds. Because several conflicts between guilds in the past led to a lot of deaths, the central government had no choice but to establish guild wars as a mean to legally allow guilds to fight each other without suffering any casualties. This setup was specifically made to avoid deaths, as at the moment humanity could not afford to lose any more talented warriors. With the pressure coming from all sides, the more heroes they lost, the worse they would be. Therefore, after a lot of discussions, the central government set up a system called guild wars. In guild wars, like the name suggested, guilds would compete with each other. And this conflict would all be done inside of a virtual world. After investing billions and billions of you, the central government managed to create a state-of-the-art virtual machine that could replicate 99.99% of reality. The closest to reality to date. Through fighting in the virtual world, the guilds could compete against each other under fair rules without losing any member of their guild. The winner of the guild war would gain something that was agreed upon prior to engaging in a guild war. Moreover, with the central government acting as the intermediary, there was no need to fear for the other party not holding up on the agreed terms. Are you really sure he's going to declare a guild war so suddenly? Small Snake, who was once again confused, looked at me and said. I mean, if the guild master wasn't stupid, he would instantly notice a few irregularities in the events that had happened in the nightclub. I mean, there are a lot of things that don't make sense if you think about it rationally. Smiling, I lazily yawned. Wapam, you're spot on. After a bit of thinking, the guild master of Luxius, Patrick Reed, will instantly realize that something was wrong with the events that led to his son losing an arm. Nodding his head, Small Snake curiously glanced in my direction. If he realized that, wouldn't that mean your plan failed? Tack. Moving my queen a few squares diagonally, I smiled. Fail? No, that's exactly what I'm hoping will happen. Victor, pause everything that you've been doing. Frowning, after a couple of hours of deep thought, Patrick realized that something didn't add up with the report he received from the incident. He had let his emotions get the best of him. Because of how much he loved his son, as soon as he heard of what had happened to him, he immediately mobilized the guild into partaking in a guild war. He didn't even check the full details of the situation. Something just doesn't add up to this story. The heir of Sword of Light shouldn't be this impulsive. The more Patrick thought about it, the more the story didn't add up. There was no way the son of the current guild master of Sword of Light would be impulsive enough to suddenly resort to removing the limb off of a direct heir of another gold-graded guild. No. He was an elite trained since birth. There was no way he would be irresponsible to the point he would actively seek to fight against the whole guild directly.
Yeah.
This definitely didn't add up. As they were both heirs of gold-graded guilds, they should obviously know when to attack and when to retreat. Turning towards Victor, who was wearing the same gray suit as before, Patrick ordered. Victor, get someone to collect all of the reports regarding the incident. From eyewitnesses to cameras and anything that can be useful in getting a better idea of what happened. He was going to get a real look at what had happened. If he caught sight of anything remotely suspicious, he would immediately get to the bottom of it. He was not going to let someone who hurt his son get away with it. Guildmaster, everything regarding the incident is here. 30 minutes after issuing the order, Victor walked next to Patrick and handed him a tablet. Thank you. Taking the tablet, Patrick looked through the files and numerous footage. As he looked through the files, Patrick's expression would change from time to time. Click. Soon, after reviewing the data for an hour or so, he turned off the table and solemnly said, "Most likely, someone is trying to instigate a conflict between us." What? Standing next to Patrick, Victor couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Are you serious? Solemnly nodding his head, Patrick placed the tablet down on his desk. Yes. Then we need to report this to Sword of Light. Maybe they know something regarding the Situa. Freezing half-sentence, Victor's brows twitched as he recalled something. Actually, now that I recall, I remember hearing that young Master Jacob, in his rage, used the artifact that you had given him and almost crippled Nolan. Right now, according to the reports, he is bedridden with no signs of waking up. Without saying a word, Patrick fell into deep thought. It seems like both sides suffered losses. His son lost an arm, whilst Nolan, the heir of Sword of Light, also seemed to have been heavily injured. If Zach Valdev, the current guild leader of Sword of Light, didn't lose his mind, he too would have reached the same conclusion as him. Someone had instigated the conflict. Reaching this conclusion, Patrick's aura intensified. Now, I really am curious as to who's daring enough to mess with two gold-graded guilds. Glancing at Victor, in a deep voice, Patrick ordered. Take all of the video evidence of the conflict and analyze it frame per frame, don't miss anything. As long as something looks suspicious, immediately report it to me. There definitely might be something we overlooked. Nodding his head, Victor took the tablet and left the office. As you wish.